AMD's new revision of FidelityFX Super Resolution has got people pretty excited. FSR 2.0 offers similar temporal upscaling to nVidia's DLSS and Epic's TSR as found inside Unreal Engine. My own excitement has been dialed up to about a 5 or a 6, mainly because I don't own either of the titles it's been released on so far. Well, that just changed, as Sony replaced the FSR 1 slider on their PC port of God of War with FSR 2. This time around, the new FSR isn't expected to be as much of a saviour for low-spec GPUs. AMD's official minimum requirements are an RX 590 or GTX 1070, as the overhead required to do the temporal upscaling takes more processing power than FSR 1's spatial upscaling. This doesn't necessarily mean lower spec GPUs won't benefit, however, and there's nothing stopping us from trying. I decided that I wanted to see for myself if FSR 2 has any benefit at all for gamers who still haven't been able to pick up a decent graphics card, and are perhaps lingering on a Vega iGPU, like the one found in the Ryzen 5 5600G. In order to get the best out of my system, I'm pairing my APU with 16 gigs of DDR4 4000 CL18 RAM, a 2.4 GHz overclock on the iGPU, and 4.6 GHz OC on the CPU, the latter of which isn't really important to APU performance, it's just my standard setup for benchmarks. My reference point for the performance test is a small, easily repeatable section early on in the game, just before the first major boss fight. For the image quality test, I've used a cutscene shortly after this. 1080 Original, what the game calls its medium preset, is a little beyond what this iGPU is capable of without scaling, coming in at an average FPS of 21. Adding FSR to these settings sees a pretty easy progression with each increment. Adding Quality FSR, which drops render resolution to 1280 by 720, increases FPS by 20%, from 21 to 25. Moving over to Balanced FSR reduces the render res to 1130 by 636 and nets a 30% increase over native 1080, approximately 27 FPS. Performance FSR is half resolution per axis, so 960 by 540, and the resulting performance improvement is up about 40% from native. The average is now ever so slightly below 30 FPS. The test area doesn't experience much frame time variance, but some later stages, particularly cutscenes, can see some drops. I can't guarantee FSR Ultra performance won't drop below 30 either. It sees an FPS increase of 60%, about 34 FPS on average, but lows still scrape below 30, and it's rendering at just 640 by 360. With low-end GPUs like this one, gamers maybe can't afford to be too precious about image quality. If you wanted a solid and sturdy 30, it might be worth looking at the low quality preset instead. Native 1080 does surprisingly well, looking to my eye not much worse than original, and with a 25 FPS average that might be good enough for some if your last games machine was a PS3. Simply turning on FSR Quality is enough to raise the average above 30, though 1% lows are still a little down from the target. Stepping up? Or is it down? Anyway, FSR Balanced is a 38% improvement from base res, averaging 34 FPS, and with 1% above 30. FSR Performance cranks things up a little further, with a 54% improvement over native, and an average of 39. Finally, the Ultra Performance preset is getting really pretty smooth, occasionally seeing the dizzying heights of 60 FPS if you look at the sky. Averages are just over 46 FPS, an 83% improvement over 1080 low. As far as performance goes, then this isn't like pressing a turbo button and seeing an instant 60 FPS from your tiny iGPU. I did wonder what it would take to get 60 FPS, and it turned out to cost quite a lot. With the native resolution dropped to 1280 by 720, FSR Ultra Performance is rendering at a minuscule 428 by 240. So we're not talking about high art here. However, it does get an incredible 256% boost over 1080 low, averaging 65 FPS, but disappointingly still sees 1% lows drop below 60, and some of the later sections of the game will probably dip even further. Still, as a proof of concept, it works, though as this is a 50-hour game, you'll probably need glasses by the end of it. God of War is one of those showpiece games that really demonstrated the capabilities of the PS4 towards the end of the generation, and it's full of long, lingering cutscenes with tons of detail, so it's always a shame to run it anywhere below 1080 original settings. That being said, this is an APU, and FSR 2 is the closest we're going to get to lossless quality scaling. To compare then, I've recorded the same brief cutscene at all the above quality settings and scaling options and compared them. I've uploaded this video in 3840 by 2160, so even though the capture was done at 1080, if you have the option to view at 4K, it should make the differences easier to spot. That aside, I'm going to shut the hell up for a bit and let the footage speak for itself. Considering just how far below the minimum requirements we are, I think this is a definite win for FSR 2. The overhead from the temporal upscaling algorithm means that we would most likely have seen higher FPS with the original version of FSR, or by simply using the resolution scale slider, but the uplift is bigger than I feared it would be, and I think the improved upscaling is worth the price in performance. I have to admit, I was never impressed with FSR 1's image quality. I kinda wanted to shout from the rooftops about how spatial upscaling is like the Emperor's new clothes, that rounding off the corners of pixels doesn't make for a better picture, and now that FSR 2 exists, I can finally do that without looking like an nVidia shill. Thanks for watching, kindly do the usual YouTube things if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you next time.